Hello and welcome to another episode of Wheel of Horror, the podcast where two best friends normally spin a wheel once a week and it normally chooses the horror film, but today we're doing a bonus episode. Today we're doing 2023's The Exorcist Believer, which was directed by David Gordon Green, and filling in for Eric is the lovely Joe Testa.
Thank you, Alec. Was that your demonic voice?
Oh no, the lovely Joe Testa. No.
There we go.
Anyways, so we are discussing a brand new movie, and this has kind of been a thing for you and I. You know, we saw like The Boogeyman and Evil Dead Rise, and then this. Oh, and Scream 6. So we've been seeing a lot of the horror movies this year, and then doing podcasts on them. So first one of October. What'd you think, Joe? Initial thoughts?
So I think both of us went in with, we tempered our expectations a bit, I would say. And I'd say it was a mixed bag for me. I would say I think there's maybe half of a really intriguing movie here, and the other half is kind of a bit cliche and very familiar and just things we've seen before, only done better. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, exactly, man. I mean, you and I, we were texting beforehand, and I didn't know too much going into this. I'd only seen the trailer once. I knew David Gordon Green was behind it, but, I didn't really do my research or look too much into it. And yeah, just like you, came out not hating it, not loving it, just kind of like, but there were good things and there were bad things, and we'll get into all that.
And maybe we should say that you and I are both, and this probably comes as no shock, but huge fans of the original movie. Mm-hmm. It's come up in many of our conversations. I think both of us, hold it in very high esteem. Maybe the best horror movie ever. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's neck and neck with The Shining in this for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so. I think this is The Exorcist is to me the scariest film of all time, but I can't pick a favorite between The Shining or The Exorcist.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, yeah, totally. I saw it at a very young age, as I'm pretty sure you did.
Oh, yeah.
and yeah, it scared the shit out of me. And now, after I've seen it so many times and, so much time has passed since I first saw it, I'm almost more just kind of in awe of it. And just, I feel like I notice something new every time I watch it. And really, I feel like just the performances are what do it for me.
Yeah. No, yeah. The acting, I mean, everything about that movie is pretty much perfect. I mean, the music, the cinematography, the acting, the story, I mean, the special effects. It's a masterpiece. Literally, it's a masterpiece. But 50 years later, I'm excited. I'm like, hey, this is cool. They're going to make a direct sequel 50 years to pretty much the day, almost, well, within a year. And to me, it felt like they didn't take any new risks. It didn't feel like I was talking about it with my mom, like, dude, there were scenes, and we know obviously from the original Exorcist, like the masturbation crucifix scene, the head turning around, the cunting daughter, like there are lines and visuals from that movie that stick with you for life. And 50 years later, you'd expect them to be like, all right, we got to up the game on this. And I felt like they took a step back.
Yeah, this is definitely a very kind of safe movie, maybe is the right word. And that's not really surprising. I don't think we're living in an era as far as movies go where we see a lot of risk taking.
Yeah.
Could I ask you really quick?
Yeah.
What is your relationship with like the rest of the Exorcist franchise? I don't think I know.
Yeah, so I have never seen 2. I saw 3 when I was in high school, and I barely remember it. I saw whichever one Paul Schrader directed. I think it's Dominion.
Yeah.
Saw that one. I saw the first season of the TV series, and I think that is... Oh, and Repossessed, of course.
Gotcha. And Dominion, it should be said, is one version of the 4th Exorcist movie. That movie was made twice. I won't get into it here, but it's kind of a fascinating story. But yeah, something that I was thinking about is the Exorcist franchise is I mean, a mixed bag at best. I mean, I think that the third movie is probably the only other one that I'd recommend.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say the franchise gets pretty wild. Like, it goes into some crazy places. And this movie, unfortunately, just kind of like so many of these kind of reboots, requels, whatever you want to call them, just kind of does the same thing again.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it really did feel like a paint by numbers for the requel reboots, where it's like, okay, do we have a legacy character? Okay, check. Is this a direct sequel that we've forgotten all the other ones? Check. And I don't know, man. I think that the original Exorcist series, from what I know about it, yeah, it focused a lot on Pazuzu and Father Marin, right? And like just like his
Mhm.
history and how he got to become this adversary with Pazuzu. This one, I guess this one does focus on, was it Pazuzu again in this one? Or it was two demons?
Yeah, I mean, they don't really get into it in any detail in this movie. That would have been something interesting to explore.
Right. Because it should have been Pazuzu if it remembers Ellen Burstyn's character.
Right.
So, anyways, they never acknowledge it as Pazuzu, but we think it's two different demons.
I will say, I thought that, I mentioned earlier, I feel like there's maybe 50% of a really kind of intriguing movie here.
Hmm.
And that, 50% comes very early. I feel like the first half of this movie is much stronger
Yeah.
than the second half. I was really kind of pulled in and intrigued by the whole mystery.
Hmm.
And, I feel like it was shot really well. It looked good. That's so important for me right now with movies. Like, movies don't seem to look like movies anymore. I felt like this looked like a movie, and it had atmosphere and just some really nice choices early on. And I felt like it was moving at kind of a deliberate pace. And yeah, I was into it. And I was thinking, you know what? They're going to pull this out.
Mm.
I don't think I ever thought, we're watching a modern classic here. But I was very optimistic early on, and I could kind of pinpoint the moment where it just kind of all went downhill for me.
Oh, okay. What do you think it is? Because I think I know mine too.
I think it's the moment, and it doesn't completely sink the ship for me, but when Angela, I think that's the main girl that gets possessed,
Hmm.
when she becomes possessed and starts kind of freaking out for the first time,
Hmm.
that's when kind of I started feeling that there were some cracks in this, just because then it started feeling very familiar. We're gonna start having these fits, and we're gonna get the kind of foul language, which isn't that foul,
No, no.
especially when you compare it to the first one. But I felt when it started checking the Exorcist boxes, in that moment, then I just started getting worried, and it gets worse. There's probably another moment where I'm like, oh, I don't think this can be saved anymore.
I know the exact moment. It's in that realm of when you were talking to, but it was like when the father's brushing his teeth, and then all of a sudden Angela just appears there, and I was like,
Mhm.
uh-oh. That moment, I was like, I really was on board for the entire, I don't know, the tension that they were building and the stage that they had set, and then that moment where she just appears, I was like, fuck, this feels like a PG-13 goddamn, jump scare bullshit movie. Like right that moment for me. But just go back to the beginning really quick for what, just to, touch upon what you were saying. Yeah, the first hour is solid, but I thought the opening couple shots were amazing. And Haiti,
Mhm.
dude, like, they do kind of like a nod to the dogs fighting in Iraq in the beginning of the original one, but the sound editing was on point, dude. It was so in line with the original Exorcist, where the opening scene, the first thing you see once the Universal logo goes away is like a really fast bike, like it's just like going, so it's like a jarring sound that just throws you into the commotion of what's going on. Loved the way that they did that.
Totally. There's some really nice choices early on that reminded me of, they're like subtle callbacks. They're
Yeah.
not like service. Like in the first movie, yeah, we have that prologue in Iraq, and William Friedkin, he was just so great at making things just feel real because he came from the world of documentaries.
Ah,
So, and in this new movie, it opens in Haiti, and there is a feeling of authenticity to it.
yeah.
I don't know where they shot it, but it doesn't feel like it's on a backlot. So early on, I was like appreciating all these things. And like in the old movie, something that kind of haunts me that just feels so real is when they're running all the tests on Reagan
Oh
in the
yeah.
hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And, this movie gets into that a little bit. Like they're checking the girls to see if they'd been sexually assaulted. And all of that just felt real. It felt like authentic.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't feel like horror movie bullshit.
Yeah.
So all of these little things that early on in this movie, I was just really, really appreciating. And yeah, it kind of goes downhill for me.
Yeah, no, totally, man. Yeah, I mean, dude, in the original one, when Reagan gets the needle in her neck, like that shit sticks with me forever, And this one, like some of the fingernail shots were like, ooh, but yeah, I've seen that before. Like, I can't say I've seen a needle in the neck in a doctor's office, like anything like The Exorcist. But I think the young girls, did a great job, kind of being possessed. I believed it. One thing I wish they had done is I wish they kept the voice from the 70s one.
Mm.
And they brought like, that like demon voice or whatever, and they kept the exact same tone and all of that, and they put that in these new girls. I would have really liked that because I wasn't crazy about their voices.
Yeah, and I was just kind of thinking during some of these scenes, what could they have done to make this better? And if you're thinking about that during a movie, the movie is obviously not working.
I know.
For me anyway. And I was thinking lots of different things. I was thinking maybe do something completely different, like just maybe something more subtle, something that doesn't call back to that first movie so much, because I just feel like we've done this so many times, not only in Exorcist sequels, but there's been so many Exorcist movies, like rip-off movies. And I mean, on the show, we've covered the exorcism of Emily Rose and
Yep.
Evil Dead. And, the Evil Dead movies are very influenced by The Exorcist. I feel like just so much of this feels cliche now,
Yep.
you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I felt like all the actors did their job. I just, just these scenes weren't really cooking for me. And, instead of being scared, or even just kind of enjoying the movie, I found myself just trying to figure out why it wasn't working for me.
Yes, that's a very good point. Exactly, because you're like all of the pieces are here, but
Mhm.
it's not clicking like it should. I thought the setup was great. I mean, having this father who basically is like a single father now, just kind of like the original one, like, but he's a widower, and I thought that was really cool, and having it be two girls getting possessed, like, interesting. But you saying, yeah, it wasn't scary. I didn't think this movie was scary at all. I don't know why there wasn't one moment where I was afraid of this movie. Maybe I'm desensitized, but the thing about The Exorcist that scares me is the visuals, but it's also the atmosphere that it sets up. This one didn't set up that same atmosphere. It had the visuals, but it just didn't have the same, I don't know, tone.
Mhm. Totally. Yeah. And I thought it had, like I said, potential, but really when the shit hits the fan is when it all starts to fall apart. And, I could pinpoint the moment where I really felt like there's kind of no saving this movie. And that's when Chris, Ellen Burstyn, who is so incredible in that first movie,
Hmm.
when she finally confronts the demon,
Yeah.
you know, it's just the whole setup of that scene is just kind of ridiculous. The girl is not tied down. You have this 90-something-year-old woman entering this room alone. She must understand that this is a dangerous situation.
Right.
And I at least wish we got some interesting dialogue between the two of them. I don't really remember much. I remember, it calls her mother, and I don't really remember much else. But the scene ends with Chris getting her eyes gouged out with a ruler, I believe.
I thought it was a crucifix,
Oh, you're right. You're right. Yes.
but
Yes, of course.
yeah, I think we should talk about Ellen Burstyn, like, just in general, because I heard some things behind the scenes about this movie with her. I don't know if you heard them too.
Oh, no. I know almost nothing about any behind the scenes anything.
Okay, so I'll give you a little taste because this is what I heard recently. So apparently they offered Ellen Burstyn quite a bit of money for this cameo. She turned it down. They doubled it, which I don't know the number, but they doubled it. Came back. Ellen Burstyn said no again. They tripled it. She said no, and this was the most amount of money she had ever been offered for any role of her entire career, to just be in basically a cameo, because she's not really in this movie very much. So she turns it down for the triple offer. Then she thinks about it and says, Jesus, that's a lot of money. I'll take it, but you also have to do a scholarship at Pace University for actors, and it has to be like in my name or whatever. So she made 3 times the initial offer and a scholarship just to be in this movie. And then that came out before the movie. So it's like, it doesn't really look good that the lead that they're begging to come back as a legacy character turned it down 3 separate times, and they had to triple the offer just to get her in the tiniest role. It's kind of a bad look, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, good for her.
Yeah.
And I will say that to some extent, even though this is kind of a glorified cameo, I would say she kind of earns it, because I feel like this movie does her dirty.
Yeah. Yep.
So she survives this attack, and she's left, I guess, without eyes for the rest of the movie, and is forced to wear, bandages with these kind of silly looking goggles over her eyes for, like, I guess she's probably in like 2 more scenes at the most.
Yeah.
And completely undignified is the word I just kind of kept coming back to.
Yeah.
It's this just not what I would have wanted for this character. And yeah, it was at that moment that I just felt like, yeah, I don't think this movie's gonna work for me.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk to, like, the ending is something that's so confusing, and it is about Ellen Burstyn, but basically she hasn't talked to Reagan in, decades, it seems like, because she wrote a story about what happened. It was very successful, and she made a lot of money. So this is 50 years after the events with Reagan, and basically she gets stabbed in the eyes, put into the hospital, and then at the end, the very end of the movie, Reagan just comes back and is like, Mom, like, I love you, or whatever. I thought that was so stupid. Like, it doesn't give any explanation why Reagan forgives her mother, how she found out she got stabbed in the eyes, like any of this shit. I think we were talking about it a little bit. It was like, is that just for people in the audience to be like, but it doesn't make sense for the plot,
Yeah, no, I agree. And I just feel like we get a lot of that now, just kind of these cameos and just moments that aren't justified, but the audience is supposed to clap or turn to the person next to them and say, I get that. Or, I don't really know. I knew it was coming in some way. I knew Linda Blair did have a cameo in this.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I could only imagine she's getting like the Luke Skywalker treatment, where we see her at the very end of this movie, and then she would be in the next movie, and then we would find out what happened to her in the years in between.
Okay.
That's my guess. I have no idea.
All right. I have a question to ask you, but I have one last thing about Ellen Burstyn I just want to talk about. This, to me, is definitely the most cringeworthy line in the movie, but one of the most cringeworthy lines that doesn't make sense that I've heard in, I can't even remember, 10 years maybe. When Ellen Burstyn is sitting there with the lead actor, the father, I can't remember his name, but he says, so tell me about the exorcism. And she's like, well, I wasn't in the room for the exorcism. And he's like, why do you think that was? And he's like, you want my honest opinion? The patriarchy. And I was like, what the fuck does that, what does that mean? I was like, what is, yeah. And I tried to, like, in the moment I was like, okay. But then later I'm like, what is she even talking about? The patriarchy kept her from being in the room where where the 2 people got killed and they saved her daughter? Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah. I have to imagine that this movie might have been a bit of a struggle in the planning stages, just because we're just, it's kind of cliche to say that we're living in a different time, but like the reputation of the Catholic Church, I will say, is very different today than maybe in the 70s.
Yeah.
And the whole, like, we get a whole kind of very inclusive Avengers Exorcist, like, like there's someone representing all these different faiths.
Yeah.
It isn't just 2 Catholic priests. So I'm not gonna defend that line. I honestly, it almost seemed like a joke.
Yeah. It really did.
So, if anything, I kind of just sympathized with the writers of this movie who have to, update this story for the
But
times.
dude, if you're gonna say a line like that, like
Hmm.
give us some examples of what you mean. Because to blindly just say the patriarchy, it's like, did the men in black come in and hold you down because you're like, well, you can't come in here. You're a crazed woman. Like that didn't. None of that happened. So, are we supposed to just be like, that's right, that's why? It's just crazy to me, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways, and like that's the thing. Even in the original movie, there wasn't a scene where they were like, "You're not allowed to come in," like at all.
No.
There was that scene didn't exist, and she wasn't like, "Let me come in." Like so, I don't know. Anyways, kind of like a slap in the face to the original fans who are like, "That's not why." But anyways, well, it makes me think of all of these like this past year or so. We had the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, we had we had Scream, which I guess is more of a sequel, and Evil Dead. So it's been a pretty solid year for these kind of remakes and sequels and stuff like that. This one to me didn't utilize Ellen Burstyn obviously like it did Jamie Lee Curtis, and I think that would have been, I don't know, a little bit more because it's like, hey, you lost your daughter because of this, even though it wasn't the demon that took her. Like it's still a result of this whole event. So maybe this could be like you ending the demon. I don't know. Like she needed a bigger part, man.
Yeah. And now that you told me kind of the behind the scenes story, it kind of makes sense. Like it almost comes off like someone who doesn't really want to be there and is just going to do the bare minimum.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. The other moment that made me, I was just like, I can't do this anymore, is the priest. Why did we waste our time? Why did we waste our time having him come and be like, I'm not doing this, and then just sit in his car and then come in at the end? That was so dumb.
Yeah. And honestly, the movie builds up to this big exorcism, and man, there's not a whole lot that is working for me in this scene, which is a real shame. And again, I found myself thinking, what could make this scarier? What could make this work? And I think part of it was this ensemble of would-be exorcists who all seem like buffoons to me.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I guess maybe that's supposed to endear them to you, or that's supposed to build suspense that there isn't this Max von Sydow character who's gonna take control. They're all kind of amateurs, but it certainly wasn't working for me. And as far as the priest, oh man, I could say I was so happy when he died. I mean, he comes in and it's like this hero moment, and I'm like, this guy's a buffoon. Like, I hope he isn't going to be like the savior of this whole thing. And I'll say in a moment that kind of worked for me in a B movie way, the girls make his head turn completely around
Yeah.
in a fun little callback to the original, and they kill him. And I was happy to see him go.
Yeah, yeah. Just a very stupid character and a waste of time for his little arc that they put him through. The only character that has like an actual real arc is Anne Dowd. I mean, she's kind of like a pain in the ass nurse, but we do learn about her nun and abortion and all that stuff, and then she kind of comes full circle to do this. And I thought her character had a lot going on. She's like,
Hmm.
she recognized it too. She's like, I know now why God put me next to your house, and why I became a nurse at that hospital. Like, it was just like, ooh, like this is more interesting than anything else in the movie.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. A lot of these things, they sound like they should really cook. Like we have all the ingredients and it should all come together in a nice little stew. But to me, it just never really gets there.
no.
And, I'm not really sure who's to blame, like I was rooting for this movie. I really was, even though, like I said, I didn't really have very high expectations. I was just kind of rooting for this movie because I felt like people were dogpiling it a bit. There was just a certain glee from maybe some fans online when kind of the Rotten Tomatoes score came out and the reviews started to leak. It just felt like there was some residual anger from certain corners of the horror community over David Gordon Green's last outing in horror, which was his Halloween trilogy.
Hmm.
And I felt like this movie being kind of a failure was validation for them. It's like, see, I told you that Halloween trilogy was terrible, and I'm actually, I'll say I'm pretty positive on his Halloween movies. This might just be silly stuff that I came across online, but it just kind of made me root for the movie just a little bit. And unfortunately, it just never got there for me.
Yeah, totally, man. The reviews online are horrific, and guys, be honest, this is not a 20% movie. Like, come on. It's not great, but it's not 20% bad. So I think you're right. There was like a concerted effort to shit on this movie.
Yeah, and part of that is because I think it has the Exorcist name on it.
Right.
And if this was the latest Conjuring movie or the latest The Nun or Insidious or whatever, maybe people would be more forgiving. And yeah, I think Green's Halloween movies left a lot of people cold. So yeah, there just seemed to be a lot of glee about the kind of negative reception of this movie, which I thought was kind of lame.
I agree. I agree. So I got a couple quick questions for you then before we wrap up here. Okay, the original Exorcist movie, it's called The Exorcist, okay? And in my mind, that's Father Merrin, he's the exorcist.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the exorcist in this? Why is it called The Exorcist? Is it just for the title? Cuz like who is it?
I mean, yeah, I think the most important thing is just having that title. That's the IP.
Yeah, yeah.
It's funny, the Exorcist 3 originally didn't have an exorcism in it, and the studio made them shoot one and like shoehorn it into the movie. So yeah, I mean, I do think just the title is the most important thing. But I guess Ann Dowd, she feels if there's a leader amongst this strange motley crew of religious people,
Right.
I guess it's her.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just like, come on. But all right, so yeah. And then I guess the believer is the father. They have announced that this is a trilogy, which seems insane to me. But this is kind of what I was going to ask you. Like, this movie kind of wrapped it up. So this is supposed to kick off as a trilogy. It's like, what's next? I mean,
Yeah. I could only imagine Linda Blair would get more involved, and who knows, there would be someone else would get possessed. And yeah, I have no doubt someone could whip up a script out there now that the writer's strike is over.
yeah.
But would it be worth seeing? I don't know. And I'm not gonna lie, this movie has sapped whatever interest in this franchise still lingered for me. But yeah, I don't know. I guess it all depends on how much money it pulls in.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, it's so weird for them to announce, like, we're going to do a trilogy. It's like, but the first one doesn't really set up anything else. I mean, it's not like Michael Myers where it's like, yeah, he got away and we got to like kill him or or whatever. This is literally just like, yeah, we defeated the demons and, Linda Blair and Ellen Bishop are cool now. It's like, all right.
I mean, the whole idea of announcing sequels before you've even released your first movie is kind of ridiculous to me.
It is.
But it just seems kind of par for the course right now.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, especially considering Universal spent $400 million to acquire the rights. The budget was $30 million. So I mean, just like, they need to make so much money for this to even be worth it. And if they've already started on this foot, I don't know, man. I'll see Deceiver, but I don't know where the plot's going to go. I personally think that, I think Linda Blair is going to get repossessed, I think.
Oh, no, they already made that movie.
But that was a joke, I think
Okay.
this one I think is really going to happen because nothing else makes sense. Like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you got any last minute thoughts before we wrap up?
I would say that something positive that just kind of seems to happen whenever we get these kind of reboots, requels, sequels, whatever, is that it does inspire me to go back and watch the originals,
Right.
and I hope it does that for other people. I'm sure it did. I feel like, this is the 50th anniversary of The Exorcist, and William Friedkin, he just passed away, so The Exorcist has kind of been, I feel like, on people's minds more lately. and I just watched a really great documentary. I had heard about it, and I rented it. It's called Leap of Faith, and it's really just a long interview with William Friedkin about the making of the movie, and it's just absolutely fascinating. So yeah, it's just been kind of I haven't rewatched The Exorcist yet. I probably will soon. But yeah, it's been fun just kind of thinking about The Exorcist again, and if so often these reboots and requels are just kind of disappointing, but something positive is it gives you an excuse to go back and watch the old one.
That's good. Yeah, no, seriously. I mean, at least there's that,
Hmm.
at least it'll make you watch the thing that inspired it. Yeah, but I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, I still think it's worth seeing. It's hard for me to say that, but
Yeah.
I don't. If you're at all interested, yeah, it's not going to blow your mind. But I think these reviews online are just, yeah, they're too biased. I go on YouTube and it's like, this movie's the worst thing ever, and it's like, guys,
Hmm.
it's a mid movie. It's like
Yeah.
it's a in the middle of the road, so it's not the worst.
Yeah. I mean, everything has to be, very hyperbolic online. Everything is either the greatest or the worst of all time.
Yeah.
And yeah, this one falls maybe a little less than in the middle. But yeah, you could certainly do worse. I actually did worse last night. I put on the new Pet Cemetery prequel, which just premiered on Paramount Plus, and yeah, I would say that might be maybe the most disappointing viewing experience of the year for me.
Oof. Yeah, I'm a little concerned that Pet Cemetery is going to turn into the new Children of the Corn, where it's just going to be
Mm.
like a million of them, and we'll see what happens. But they didn't do this because Stephen King didn't release anything, right? They just did this.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I guess the 2019 Pet Cemetery movie, the remake, which I wasn't much of a fan of either, apparently it made enough money to warrant another movie. So yeah, and yeah, I definitely don't recommend it.
Yeah, I wasn't planning on it, but well, Joe, thank you very much for jumping on for this bonus episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And yeah, we're jumping into October, so we will see you guys all soon. We're going to be doing Wheel of Horror 666, which just means 6 movies in a row. But we'll see you guys. It'll be coming out very soon, so get ready for that. And yeah, have a great week.